It was supposed to be the perfect trip. A sun-drenched island, a senior class getaway, a celebration before stepping into the real world. The music faded, the crowd spilled into the warm Caribbean night, and she stepped into a car with 3 young men. That was the last time anyone ever saw her alive. Help Natalee's story live on. Press like, share this video so more people know her name, and subscribe with the bell on to stand with every family still searching. On May 30th, 2005, as the clock pushed past 1 a.m., Natalee Holloway, an 18-year-old honors student from Mountain Brook, Alabama, USA, was last seen leaving a popular nightclub in Aruba. She was laughing, carefree, and stepping into a car with 3 young men. She never came back. Natalee wasn't the kind of girl who just disappeared. She had a bright smile that lit up every room, a 4.0 GPA, and dreams of becoming a doctor. Her friends described her as responsible, grounded, and always the one to look out for others. That's why, when the sun rose over the Caribbean the next morning and Natalee wasn't in her hotel room, panic set in. Her suitcase was still neatly packed, her passport untouched, her plane ticket for the flight home waiting on the dresser. The trip had been organized for 124 Mountain Brook graduates. Teachers, parents, and chaperones had warned students to stay safe, but Aruba was seen as paradise, not a danger zone. Nobody expected the nightmare that was about to unfold. The last known people with Natalee were Joran van Sloot, a 17-year-old Dutch honors student living in Aruba, and his 2 friends, Deepak and Satish Kalpo. Witnesses saw her climb into their silver Honda outside the bar that night. According to them, she was intoxicated but smiling, trusting these locals to get her back to the Holiday Inn. But she never made it. By sunrise, the Holloway family was frantic. Calls to Natalee's phone went unanswered. Her friends were in tears. Hours later, her mother, Beth Holloway, caught the first flight to Aruba, desperate to find her daughter. The Caribbean sun beat down on palm trees and tourists, but beneath the paradise surface, a darker story was about to emerge, one filled with lies, shifting timelines, and chilling inconsistencies. The question that haunted everyone from the first morning: where was Natalee? And more disturbingly, who was the last person to truly see her alive? Do you think Natalee ever willingly got into that car? Or was she manipulated into trusting the wrong people? Stay with me, because the trail of evidence, deception, and heartbreak is just beginning. Airports are usually places of joy, reunions, vacations, beginnings. But on May 31st, 2005, one woman stepped off a plane in Aruba with her heart in her throat. Beth Holloway had taken the first available flight from Birmingham, Alabama, after receiving the call no parent ever wants. Her daughter, Natalee Holloway, hadn't made it back to the hotel. Beth was desperate, clutching a photo of Natalee, her mind replaying the last time she saw her daughter alive. Natalee had been glowing with excitement, boarding the plane for her senior trip, talking about beaches and freedom before college. Now, Beth was on the same island, but under the darkest of circumstances. She marched straight to the Holiday Inn. Natalee's room was still neat. Her luggage was zipped, untouched. Her passport and ticket home sat waiting on the dresser. Beth's stomach dropped. A mother knows when something is wrong, and this was all wrong. By that afternoon, she tracked down the last people seen with Natalee, Joran van Sloot and the Kalpo brothers. Their story was chilling in its simplicity. They claimed they dropped Natalee back at her hotel around 2 a.m. Joran even described watching her walk toward the lobby before they drove away. But when Beth checked with the hotel, the cameras showed nothing. The security guard swore Natalee never returned. Beth felt fury rise inside her. "They're lying," she whispered. "They know where she is." Within hours, Beth was knocking on doors, showing Natalee's photo, begging for help. The tropical sun blazed, the waves shimmered, but Beth's world had collapsed into a single mission: find her daughter. And that night, under the Caribbean sky, the island paradise began to shift. Aruba was no longer a vacation spot, it was a crime scene. Do you believe Joran's story about dropping Natalee off? Or was it just the first of many lies? By June 1st, 2005, word had spread across Aruba. An American girl, Natalee Holloway, was missing. Flyers with her face plastered every wall, her smile now haunting every passerby. Volunteers gathered at dawn, combing beaches, rocky coves, and dense brush. Students from Mountain Brook joined the search, their tan graduation tans now pale with fear. The island, usually alive with laughter and music, grew heavy with tension. The Aruban government brought in search dogs and helicopters. Boats swept the coastline, scanning for any trace of Natalee. The waters sparkled like glass, but they offered no answers. Meanwhile, Beth Holloway didn't rest. She followed every lead, talked to every police officer, demanded progress. "My daughter is out there," she insisted, her voice trembling but unbroken. But whispers began circulating, whispers that Natalee had been drunk, that she might have run off, that maybe this was all just a misunderstanding. Beth crushed those rumors instantly. Natalee would not vanish without a word. Something happened, and they know what. She meant Joran and the Kalpos. Police finally brought them in for questioning. Their stories began to shift. First, they said they dropped her off at the hotel. Then, they claimed they left her near the beach. Each answer contradicted the last. The more they spoke, the more Beth was certain. Her daughter's life had crossed paths with something sinister, but there was no proof, no body, no evidence, just sand, water, and silence. If you were in Beth Holloway's place, would you trust the Aruban authorities or take matters into your own hands? The interrogation room was small, suffocating. A single light swung overhead as Joran Sloot leaned back, arms crossed. At just 17, he was tall, athletic, a poker player who knew how to bluff. The detectives pressed him. "Where did you take Natalee Holloway?" Joran smirked. He insisted he dropped her at the Holiday Inn. But then, under pressure, his story shifted. He said she wanted to see the beach. He claimed she was drunk, stumbling, and he left her sitting in the sand under the stars. "Alone?" the detective asked. "Yes," Joran shrugged, but his demeanor was chilling. No sorrow, no urgency, just casual detachment. Outside the station, Beth Holloway waited, her heart pounding. When she learned Joran had admitted to leaving Natalee by the beach, she collapsed in disbelief. Who abandons a girl alone at 2 a.m. on an island? The Kalpo brothers echoed Joran's new version, but none of it added up. No one saw Natalee walk back. No hotel camera caught her. The police faced a dilemma. Without a body or hard evidence, they couldn't press charges. Aruba's paradise depended on tourism. Arresting locals for the disappearance of an American girl threatened more than just justice. It threatened the island's reputation. Beth didn't care about politics. She wanted answers, but all she got were contradictions, delays, and a deepening sense of horror. And behind his calm exterior, Joran hid something darker. Do you think Joran was just a manipulative teenager? Or was this the face of a killer hiding in plain sight? If you're watching this, you're part of keeping Natalee's story alive. Tap like, share this video, and subscribe with the bell on so her name never fades. By the end of the first week, the island was no longer paradise. It was a place haunted by whispers. Every cafe, every taxi, every shop echoed with the same name, Natalee Holloway. Tourists whispered that maybe she ran off. Locals whispered that maybe it was drugs. Newspapers printed theories, each headline more sensational than the last. Beth Holloway fought back tears as she read them. Her daughter wasn't a runaway. She wasn't reckless. Natalee was an honors student with her future laid out. But the rumors stuck. They painted Natalee as irresponsible, even complicit in her own disappearance. For Beth, it was salt in an open wound. Meanwhile, Joran and the Kalpos continued to walk free. They went about their lives, smiling for cameras, even as the world grew suspicious of their lies. The tension on the island reached a breaking point when police finally arrested the three. Cameras flashed as they were led away in handcuffs. Hope surged through Natalee's family and friends. But what came next would shatter that hope. Do you think public pressure finally pushed the police into acting? Or did they truly believe Joran and the Kalpos were guilty? The streets of Aruba buzzed with tension on June 9, 2005. The police finally made their move. Joran Sloot and the Kalpo brothers, Deepak and Satish, were arrested. For days, they had spun different versions of what happened on the night Natalee Holloway vanished. Now, they were in custody, and for Beth Holloway, this felt like a turning point. Reporters swarmed outside the station. Cameras captured the moment Joran, just 17, was led in by officers. His calm face unsettled many. Deepak and Satish, quieter but equally suspicious, kept their heads down. Onlookers whispered, hoping this was the breakthrough everyone had waited for. Inside, the suspects stuck to their stories. They repeated that Natalee was dropped at her hotel, then later adjusted it again, claiming she was left near the beach. Each version contradicted the last. Still, the arrests brought hope to Natalee's family. But there was a problem. Aruba's legal system required strong evidence to hold someone for long. Despite massive searches, no physical trace of Natalee had been found. No clothing, no belongings, no body. Without evidence, the suspects couldn't be formally charged. Days turned into weeks. The island became divided. Some locals resented the international spotlight, believing Aruba was being unfairly portrayed as unsafe. Others sympathized deeply with Beth and her family. Beth refused to give up. She appeared daily on television, demanding answers, begging for cooperation, and calling out the lies. Her determination fueled the case, but it also drew criticism. Some claimed she was too aggressive. Others thought her grief was being manipulated by the media. But Beth didn't care. Her only mission was Natalee. Do you think the suspects should have been held longer despite the lack of evidence? Or should the law have been followed strictly? Keep Natalee's name alive. Hit like, share this video with others, and subscribe with the bell on so her story is never forgotten. Beth Holloway didn't see Aruba the way tourists did anymore. For her, the palm trees, the blue waves, the pastel-painted buildings weren't paradise. They were reminders of what she hadn't found. Her daughter, Natalee Holloway. The island had been searched in every direction. Volunteers on foot combed through rocky hillsides. Police dogs sniffed through fields of cacti. Helicopters circled above, and divers explored the deep reefs. Still nothing. Every lead ended the same silence. But Beth refused to stop. She went to the police station every morning, demanding updates, pressing detectives, insisting that Joran Sloot and the Kalpoe brothers were hiding the truth. When the police hesitated, she went directly to government officials. Natalee didn't disappear into thin air, she reminded them. Someone knows something. Her persistence became legendary. Locals watched as she drove across the island in sweltering heat, knocking on doors, showing Natalee's picture, begging for information. Some whispered admiration. Others muttered frustration. But Beth didn't care what people thought. Her daughter's life was worth every ounce of energy she had. At night, she called home to Alabama. Family and friends gathered on the other end of the line, offering encouragement. But Beth knew they wanted answers as much as she did. She could hear it in their voices. The disbelief that Natalee, the smart, responsible girl they all loved, could simply vanish. The truth was, Beth's determination kept the search alive. Without her relentless pressure, Natalee's case might already have been fading into the background. But Beth wasn't just a grieving mother. She was becoming a force the island couldn't ignore. Would you have the strength to fight like Beth Holloway? Or would you collapse under the weight of such loss? By midsummer, Natalee Holloway's disappearance was no longer just a family's tragedy. It was a global headline. American news outlets ran the story every day. Cable networks broadcast live from Aruba, their cameras capturing the palm-lined streets where rumors spread faster than facts. Beth Holloway found herself thrust into the spotlight. She gave interviews at sunrise and stood at press conferences until midnight. She told and retold the story of Natalee, each time with the same heartbreaking detail. A daughter who boarded a plane to Aruba with dreams of adventure and never came home. The coverage had two sides. On one hand, it kept Natalee's face on screens worldwide. Her smile, her blonde hair, her Alabama roots. People everywhere now knew who she was. Thousands joined in prayer vigils, sending letters of support to her family. But the constant attention also fueled criticism. Some said Beth was too aggressive, too demanding. Others accused the media of sensationalizing tragedy. Aruban officials complained about being portrayed as incompetent. Still, the cameras never turned away, and Beth never stopped speaking. "If the media forgets her," she said, "then the world forgets her, and I won't let that happen." The coverage became part of the investigation itself, pushing officials, shaping public opinion, and forcing every new development into the open. Do you think the media helped by keeping pressure on Aruba? Or did the spotlight make it harder for investigators to do their work? When Joran van der Sloot and the Kalpoe brothers walked out of custody, the world watched in disbelief. They had been the last known people with Natalee Holloway. They had lied repeatedly, shifting their stories each time police pressed them. But without physical evidence, without a body, the law tied investigators' hands. A judge ruled they couldn't be held any longer. Beth Holloway stood outside the courthouse, her voice shaking with anger. "How can you release the last people seen with my daughter?" she demanded. Reporters scribbled her words, cameras flashed, and the frustration spread beyond Aruba's shores. Back in Alabama, Mountain Brook residents lit candles and prayed, furious that the suspects were free. To them, it felt like justice slipping away. Joran, meanwhile, seemed almost smug. He spoke to reporters, sometimes calmly, sometimes arrogantly, offering new versions of the story that contradicted his earlier ones. Each time he spoke, Beth's pain deepened. She could hear the lies, and yet the law allowed him to walk free. The release marked a turning point. Public confidence in Aruba's justice system faltered. People began asking whether the island cared more about protecting its image than finding the truth. For the Holloways, one thing was clear. The fight had only just begun. Do you think the suspect's release showed a failure of justice? Or was it simply the reality of working without evidence? In Mountain Brook, Alabama, life moved forward, but not for the Holloway family. Natalee's friends packed for college. Her teachers prepared for a new school year. But her family lived in a constant ache, their lives frozen on May 30th, 2005. Every empty chair at the dinner table was a reminder. Every family photo stung with the absence of Natalee's smile. Beth Holloway balanced her grief with relentless advocacy. She traveled, spoke at events, and pleaded for international attention. At home, she tried to hold her family together. Natalee's stepfather, Jug Twitty, carried much of the burden, organizing logistics, supporting Beth's travels, and keeping the search alive financially. The emotional toll was immense. Sleep was rare. Peace was impossible. And yet, in every moment, Beth carried hope. "Until someone shows me proof otherwise," she said. "I believe my daughter is alive." That belief fueled her, but it also deepened her pain. Each day without answers was another cut. Still, she pressed forward because giving up meant abandoning Natalee. Do you think holding on to hope helps families survive? Or does it make the pain even harder to bear? Show your support for Natalee Holloway. Press like, share this video with others, and subscribe with the bell on so her fight for justice continues. When the investigation seemed stalled, the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation stepped in. Aruba's small police force was overwhelmed, and the FBI brought both expertise and pressure. Agents began reviewing evidence, re-interviewing witnesses, and analyzing every statement Joran van der Sloot and the Kalpoe brothers had given. But the results were frustrating. No fingerprints, no phone records that led anywhere, and no DNA. It was as if Natalee Holloway had vanished into thin air. Behind the scenes, American officials urged Aruban authorities to take stronger measures. The case had become political, straining relations between the island and the United States. For the Holloway family, none of that mattered. They just wanted the truth. Beth Holloway continued her campaign. She met with U.S. congressmen, appeared on national television, and demanded answers. She spoke with a quiet but fierce determination, making sure her daughter's name stayed in the headlines. The FBI's involvement raised hope, but it also highlighted a painful truth. Without solid evidence, even the best investigators were left with speculation. Do you think the FBI should have been given more control of the case, even though it happened on foreign soil? As weeks turned into months, rumors began to overshadow facts. Some claimed Natalee Holloway had been seen on another island. Others whispered she was alive but held by traffickers. Each rumor carried a spark of hope, but each time it was crushed by reality. Beth Holloway faced the cruel weight of speculation. Journalists followed her every move, sometimes painting her as a hero, other times questioning her motives. Some locals grew defensive, worried the case was damaging Aruba's reputation as a tourist haven. The Holloway family, however, pushed back. Natalee was not a headline. She was their daughter, their friend, their classmate. Her absence was not a story. It was a wound. But the rumors continued, fueled by the suspects' ever-changing statements. Joran seemed to enjoy the spotlight. One day, he claimed Natalee collapsed on the beach. Another day, he insisted he left her alive. His contradictions left investigators chasing ghosts. For Beth, each rumor was both a dagger and a reminder. "I don't care about what people say," she told a reporter. "I care about finding Natalee." Do you think rumors and speculation helped keep Natalee's story alive, or did they cause more harm than good? In August 2005, the focus turned to the sea. Some believed Natalee Holloway's body had been dumped offshore. Search boats, equipped with sonar, scanned the ocean floor. Divers descended into the deep, braving sharp currents and poor visibility. The search was dangerous, and it was heartbreaking. Families and volunteers watched from the shore, praying for any sign. At times, objects were found: clothing, debris, even bones. But each time, testing proved they weren't Natalee's. The vastness of the ocean became a cruel metaphor. Somewhere out there might be the truth, but finding it was nearly impossible. Beth Holloway stood on the docks, watching boats return empty-handed. Each time, her face carried the same mixture of pain and unyielding determination. Despite the failures, the search at sea showed one thing clearly: people had not forgotten Natalee. Volunteers, strangers, and entire organizations gave their time and resources to help. It wasn't closure, but it was solidarity. And Beth drew strength from it. Do you think searching the ocean was the right move, or should investigators have focused entirely on land? As 2005 gave way to 2006, the Holloway family faced the unthinkable. Natalee had been missing for more than half a year. Back in Alabama, her absence was everywhere. Her high school classmates went off to college. Her seat at family gatherings remained empty. Life moved forward for the world. But for her family, time had stopped on May 30th, 2005. In Aruba, the investigation slowed. Authorities admitted progress was minimal. Some officials quietly hinted the case might never be solved. But Beth refused to let Natalee become a cold case. She continued to lobby for action, traveling, speaking, and keeping the spotlight burning. Joran van der Sloot's arrogance grew. He gave interviews, played with the media, and seemed to thrive on the attention. His shifting stories infuriated Beth and convinced many that he was hiding the truth. But without hard evidence, nothing could stick. The Holloway family rang in the new year with prayers, not celebrations. And though hope was battered, it wasn't broken. If your loved one went missing abroad, do you think you'd ever stop searching? Or would you fight endlessly, as Beth did? Don't let Natalee Holloway's name fade. Like this video to show support, share it so others know her story, and subscribe with the bell to honor the fight for truth. Time is the cruelest enemy in a missing persons case. As months passed, the trail to Natalee Holloway grew colder. Witnesses forgot details. Evidence, if it ever existed, was lost to sand and tide. But for the Holloway family, time didn't bring healing. It brought heavier grief. Every day without answers was another day of torment. Beth Holloway's face showed the toll. Her eyes carried exhaustion. Her voice often cracked with emotion, but her resolve never faltered. The community in Mountain Brook held vigils. Candles flickered in the night, prayers were whispered, and posters with Natalee's picture remained in shop windows. She was not forgotten. In Aruba, some locals grew frustrated with the case's persistence. Tourism suffered, and resentment built. But others quietly admitted that what happened to Natalee had revealed flaws in the island system. Flaws that left justice out of reach. Beth refused to surrender to despair. "Natalee is my daughter," she said. "As long as I breathe, I will search for her." Her words captured the heart of a nation and reminded the world that this wasn't just a case. It was a life stolen and a family broken. Do you think time always weakens the search for justice? Or can persistence eventually break down even the coldest walls? In 2008, the case of Natalee Holloway took a shocking turn. Dutch crime reporter Peter R. de Vries aired hidden camera footage that stunned the world. In the recording, Joran van der Sloot, relaxed and laughing, claimed Natalee had collapsed on the beach after drinking and drugs. He said she wasn't moving, and that a friend helped him dispose of her body at sea. For Beth Holloway, watching those tapes was agony. Her daughter's fate reduced to a story told by a smirking teenager. Yet even in that moment, there were contradictions. Experts later pointed out Joran often lied, enjoying the control he had over the narrative. Was this the truth, or another manipulation? The footage reignited global outrage. People demanded Joran's arrest. Aruba reopened parts of the investigation, but once again, there was no physical evidence. The sea remained silent, and the island's justice system couldn't hold him on words alone. Joran, sensing the spotlight, continued to change his story. One day, he swore the tapes were exaggerated. Another day, he stood by them. His lies piled up so high it became impossible to separate fact from fiction. But for Natalee's family, the tapes weren't just words. They were a cruel reminder that the person who likely held the truth was treating it as a game. Do you think Joran's tape confession was real, or just another manipulation to stay in control? Keep the fight alive. Smash like, share Natalee's story, and subscribe with the bell on so her truth is never silenced. As years passed, Joran van der Sloot's name continued to circle in crime headlines, but not just because of Natalee Holloway. In 2010, he traveled to Peru. There, he met a young woman named Stephanie Flores in a casino. Days later, her body was found in his hotel room. She had been brutally murdered. Joran confessed. The news hit Beth Holloway like another blow. The man she believed responsible for her daughter's disappearance had killed again. For her, it was confirmation of what she already knew. Joran was dangerous, and Natalee had likely been his first victim. The Peruvian authorities wasted no time. Joran was convicted of murder and sentenced to 28 years in prison. The contrast was stark. Where Aruba had faltered, Peru delivered swift justice. But for the Holloway family, justice for Stephanie was bittersweet. Natalee's case remained unresolved. No body, no closure, just endless questions. Yet Beth never wavered. She traveled to Peru, stood in front of the prison where Joran was held, and said the words every mother would want to say to the man she believed took her daughter. "You destroyed our lives, but you will not destroy our hope." Do you think Joran's conviction in Peru proved his guilt in Natalee's case? Or should each crime stand on its own? The Holloway family faced a pain few could imagine. The pain of never knowing. Years had passed. Investigations opened and closed. Suspects arrested and released. Confessions made and retracted. Still, Natalee Holloway's body was never found. For Beth, the torment wasn't just losing her daughter. It was the endless limbo between hope and despair. She built her life around advocacy, turning grief into action. She helped other families of the missing, guided them through bureaucracies, and reminded them that persistence mattered. Natalee's absence became a mission bigger than one case. It became a fight for all the missing whose names weren't in the headlines. In Alabama, the community of Mountain Brook never forgot. Natalee's high school friends grew older, built families, and pursued careers, but her memory lingered like a shadow. Every reunion, every gathering, carried the unspoken question. What if Natalee had been here? For most families, time heals wounds, but for the Holloway family, time only deepened them. Each passing year without answers about Natalee Holloway felt like another betrayal, another reminder that justice had slipped through their hands. In Alabama, Mountain Brook's community carried her memory in small but powerful ways. At high school graduations, her name was whispered by classmates who went on to college, careers, and marriages, the very milestones Natalee should have lived. At candlelight vigils, her photo glowed in the dark, framed by roses and prayers. Beth Holloway poured herself into advocacy. She spoke at universities, traveled across the country, and met with lawmakers. Her message was clear: what happened to Natalee could happen to anyone. She wanted families to be prepared for the unthinkable when loved ones traveled abroad. In 2007, she helped launch the Natalee Holloway Resource Center, dedicated to assisting families of the missing. Yet behind the strength, the private pain was overwhelming. Nights were the hardest. Beth often found herself replaying Natalee's last known hours. The laughter at the club, the walk to the car, the unanswered questions. "If I close my eyes," she once told a friend, "I can still see her walking away, and I don't know where she went." Meanwhile, in Aruba, the investigation had nearly ground to a halt. Files gathered dust. Authorities quietly admitted there was little more they could do without new evidence. For many, Natalee's disappearance became a closed chapter. But not for her mother. Beth returned to Aruba multiple times, pressing officials, following rumors, and retracing the same steps she had taken in 2005. Tourists would sometimes stop her, recognizing her from television, offering hugs or whispers of sympathy. Others turned away, tired of the story. But Beth never let the island forget. For her, time was not an excuse. Every day without Natalee was another reason to fight. Do you think families of the missing should keep pushing indefinitely? Or is there ever a moment to let go? Keep Natalee's memory alive. Press like, share her story, and subscribe with the bell so her name is never silenced. By 2007, most families would have resigned themselves to silence. But Beth Holloway refused. She had promised her daughter Natalee Holloway that she would never stop, and promises like that become lifelines for grieving mothers. Beth turned her personal tragedy into advocacy. She traveled across the United States, appearing on talk shows, crime conferences, and schools, telling Natalee's story with raw emotion. She warned parents about the risks of international travel, urged governments to prioritize missing person cases, and reminded everyone that her daughter was more than a headline. She was a young woman with dreams stolen. In Washington, Beth met with lawmakers, lobbying for better systems to protect American citizens abroad. Her presence carried weight. Politicians listened, journalists recorded, and grieving families who had lost their own children found a voice in her. But at home in Alabama, the emptiness never left. Natalee's room remained preserved, her belongings untouched. Family dinners always carried an empty chair, as if waiting for her return. Friends struggled with milestones, college graduations, weddings, new jobs, because Natalee wasn't there to share them. Aruba had grown quiet about the case. Officials insisted they had no new leads, no new evidence. For many, the disappearance was fading into the past. But for Beth, time was an enemy, not a healer. She returned to Aruba multiple times, walking the same beaches, speaking with anyone who might offer a clue. Some locals avoided her, tired of the spotlight. Others whispered their support, believing she was right to keep pushing. Beth's face showed the toll, exhaustion, sadness, but also determination that burned like fire. "Natalee is my daughter," she told reporters. "As long as I live, I will not stop searching." Do you think relentless advocacy can keep pressure alive forever, or does the world eventually tune out? For years, Beth Holloway had warned the world that Joran Sloot was dangerous. In 2010, her fears were confirmed in the most horrifying way. Joran was living in Peru when he met 21-year-old Stephanie Flores at a casino. Just days later, she was found dead in his hotel room. She had been beaten and murdered. Joran confessed. The parallels to Natalee's case were impossible to ignore. A young woman, a night out, trust placed in the wrong person, and a life stolen. For Beth, it was vindication and heartbreak. She believed this was proof that Joran had been responsible for Natalee's disappearance all along. Peruvian authorities wasted no time. Joran was arrested, tried, and convicted. Unlike Aruba, Peru's justice system moved swiftly. He was sentenced to 28 years in prison. His arrogance finally met with iron bars. Beth traveled to Peru. She stood outside the prison where Joran was held, her voice steady but sharp. "You destroyed our lives, But you will not destroy our hope. For many, this was justice delayed. Not for Natalee, but for another young woman whose life ended in tragedy. Still, it confirmed what Beth had always known. Joran van der Sloot was a predator, and her daughter had likely been his first victim. Even as he sat in prison, Joran continued to spin lies, offering false confessions and retracting them for money or attention. But this time, the world saw him for what he was. Do you think Joran's conviction in Peru was enough justice? Or should the world still demand accountability for Natalee's disappearance? Even after his conviction in Peru, Joran van der Sloot's obsession with the Holloway case didn't end. From behind bars, he found ways to keep twisting the story, and in 2010, he pulled one of his cruelest stunts yet. Desperate for money, Joran reached out to Beth Holloway's attorney with a shocking offer. For $250,000, he claimed he would finally reveal where Natalee Holloway's body was hidden. He said he would provide proof for an upfront payment of $25,000, and the rest would follow once her remains were found. It was extortion dressed as hope. For Beth, the choice was agonizing. Could this finally be the truth, or was it just another cruel game? In her heart, she knew Joran's history of lies, but the chance of answers for Natalee's fate was too important to ignore. The FBI became involved. Agents monitored the transaction, recording every step. Joran took the money, flew to Aruba, and provided a location. He claimed Natalee's body was buried beneath the foundation of a house. Investigators rushed to the site. Hope surged, but once again Joran had lied. The property was searched, and nothing was found. It wasn't just a deception. It was an intentional act of cruelty. He had dangled closure in front of Natalee's family and then ripped it away for money. The FBI charged him with wire fraud and extortion, ensuring that even if he ever left Peru's prison, the United States would be waiting. For Beth, the betrayal was familiar but still devastating. It's like reliving the loss all over again, she admitted. Each lie reopened wounds that had never healed. But this time, at least, the law had caught Joran in the act. The extortion scheme proved what many already knew. Joran van der Sloot would never stop using Natalee's name for his own gain. To him, her memory was currency. To her family, it was sacred. Beth refused to let his manipulation break her. Instead, she used it as another reason to fight, not only for Natalee, but for every family who had been preyed upon in their grief. Do you think Beth was right to engage with Joran's offer, or should she have refused to give him attention at all? Don't let Joran's lies define Natalee's story. Press like, share her truth, and subscribe with the bell so her memory rises above his deception. In 2010, 5 years after Natalee Holloway vanished in Aruba, Beth Holloway made a journey few mothers could bear. She traveled to Lima, Peru, to see face-to-face the man she believed had stolen her daughter's life, Joran van der Sloot. He was being held at Miguel Castro prison, notorious for its brutal conditions. Prison walls loomed high, topped with barbed wire. Guards led Beth through security checkpoints, and for a moment, she paused, gripping Natalee's photograph close to her chest. She had stared into this man's eyes countless times on television, but now she would stand in front of him, flesh and blood. When Joran appeared, shackled and escorted by guards, he looked different. Gone was the smug teenager of Aruba's headlines. Prison had hardened him. His face was pale, his hair unkempt, but his eyes, those cold, manipulative eyes, were unchanged. Beth held her ground. "Where is Natalee?" she asked, her voice trembling but firm. Joran stared back, offering nothing but silence. Then, in the way only he could, he smirked, an expression Beth had come to recognize as the mask of his lies. He offered vague comments, hinting at knowledge, then pulling back. He thrived on the power of withholding the truth. Beth's hands shook, but her voice grew stronger. "You took my daughter. You destroyed our lives. But you will not destroy my hope." For Beth, it wasn't about extracting a confession that day. It was about reclaiming power. For years, Joran had controlled the narrative, playing games with the truth. Standing before him, Beth refused to be intimidated. She showed him that his lies could never erase Natalee's life or the fight for her memory. The confrontation ended without answers, but it carried symbolic weight. A grieving mother faced the man who embodied her worst nightmare and did not back down. Later, Beth admitted the encounter brought her no closure, yet it solidified her resolve. "If he thinks he can break me, he's wrong," she said. "Natalee is worth every fight, every tear, every step." Outside the prison gates, reporters waited, cameras flashing. Beth raised Natalee's photo high above her head. She wanted the world to see that this story was not finished, that her daughter's name would never vanish. In that moment, Beth Holloway wasn't just a mother searching for her child. She was a symbol of resilience, standing in defiance of cruelty. Would you have had the strength to confront Joran face to face, knowing he might smirk instead of confess? In Mountain Brook, Alabama, the shadow of Natalee Holloway's disappearance never fully lifted. Years after that senior trip to Aruba, her classmates became parents, professionals, and community leaders. Yet in every reunion, every gathering, there was always one name that lingered on people's lips, one face missing from the group photos: Natalee. Her high school kept her memory alive. Teachers spoke about her kindness and sharp intellect. Friends recalled the way she always looked out for others, the one who made them laugh during stressful exams, the girl with dreams of becoming a doctor. At vigils, her graduation photo, Natalee, smiling, radiant, stood framed in flowers, a reminder that her absence was permanent, but her presence enduring. For Beth Holloway, resilience became a way of life. She had been thrust into the public eye against her will, but she turned that burden into a mission. Through her advocacy, she helped families of other missing children and adults navigate the labyrinth of foreign police systems and bureaucracies. She spoke at schools, reminding young people about the dangers of complacency when traveling. Her pain became her purpose. Still, the private moments revealed the cost. There were days when Beth admitted she could barely summon the energy to move forward. Nights when she held Natalee's belongings and wept silently. But each time, she reminded herself, if she gave up, Natalee's story risked being forgotten, and that was something she could never allow. Her strength inspired others. Parents who faced their own tragedies sought her out, not just for advice, but for the courage to keep living. Communities invited her to speak, not because she had answers, but because she embodied perseverance in the face of endless questions. Natalee's legacy became woven into the fabric of Mountain Brook itself. A community that had once celebrated her as a bright student now honored her as a symbol of resilience, compassion, and the fight for justice. Beth often repeated the same message: "I live every day for Natalee. My daughter's story doesn't end with her disappearance. It lives on in everything I do." Do you think resilience is born out of tragedy? Or is it a choice people make every single day to keep going? Natalee Holloway's disappearance was not just a tragedy. It became a turning point. By the late 2000s, her story had changed how people thought about travel, safety, and international justice. In the United States, Natalee's name was mentioned in classrooms, on college campuses, and at travel agencies. Parents became more cautious about sending their children abroad. Schools hosting senior trips rewrote safety guidelines. Travel insurance companies saw a surge in demand for plans covering emergencies overseas. But the impact stretched beyond families. Lawmakers began asking questions. What happens when Americans vanish in foreign countries? Who is responsible for protecting them? And how can justice be pursued when local laws clash with American expectations? Beth Holloway stepped into this gap. She became not only an advocate for her daughter, but also for countless others. In 2010, she partnered with the National Museum of Crime and Punishment to launch the Natalee Holloway Resource Center. The center provided resources for families of the missing, teaching them how to work with foreign governments, the State Department, and law enforcement. It was born out of Beth's own painful lessons, mistakes she refused to let other families repeat. Every family deserves to know they are not alone, Beth said. If Natalee's story can save even one person, then her light still shines. Her fight drew attention to a larger problem: how easily cases fall apart without cooperation across borders. Aruba had struggled with evidence. Peru had moved swiftly in Stephanie Flores' murder. and the US had been stuck in between. The inconsistencies showed just how fragile justice could be when international boundaries were involved. Beth's tireless advocacy created a legacy that stretched far beyond Aruba. She became a mentor to families in crisis, a public voice demanding change, and a reminder that love does not end with loss. Natalee's story shifted conversations. It made people ask harder questions about safety, accountability, and the rights of families searching for the missing. She became a symbol not only of what was lost, but of the fight for what could be improved. Do you believe one case can change how the world handles missing persons? Or does the system always need bigger reform? Beth's life became a balance between public strength and private grief. In public, she stood tall, meeting officials, speaking at events, guiding other families. But behind closed doors, the weight of Natalee's absence pressed down. Friends recalled seeing her sit quietly with Natalee's photo in her lap, whispering prayers, tears slipping silently down her face. Yet every time despair threatened to overwhelm her, Beth reminded herself of Natalee's spirit. "She wouldn't want me to quit," she often said. That conviction pushed her through the darkest nights. Mountain Brook rallied around her. Neighbors delivered meals, friends kept her company, and churches organized vigils year after year. At each service, candles flickered, soft hymns filled the air, and Natalee's name echoed through the community. People who had never met her still spoke of her as if she were family, proof that her story transcended her small town. Beth's advocacy stretched far beyond Alabama. She became a guest speaker at universities, crime victim forums, and international conferences. Each time, she carried Natalee's story with her, ensuring that the world didn't just remember the tragedy, but the young woman at the center of it, a bright, ambitious girl whose life had been cut short. Her determination resonated with families of other missing children. Many sought her out, desperate for guidance. Beth offered them both practical help and emotional support. "If I can survive this, you can too," she told them. In those moments, her pain became a lifeline for others. But in private, Beth admitted the struggle never truly ended. "Grief is not something you get over," she said. "It's something you learn to carry, and I carry it for Natalee." Natalee's name lived on in scholarships, awareness campaigns, and community events. For Mountain Brook, she wasn't just a missing person. She was a reminder of how fragile life is and how far love can reach. Do you think grief ever truly heals, or does it simply reshape into strength over time? For Beth Holloway, the years after Natalee's disappearance became a test of endurance. Every birthday, every holiday was another milestone her daughter should have celebrated but never did. Each year, Beth lit a candle on Natalee's birthday, not as a symbol of loss, but of the light her daughter had brought into the world. Mountain Brook stood beside her. Neighbors planted gardens in Natalee's honor. Churches added her name to prayer lists that never stopped. Teachers shared stories about her determination and warmth, ensuring that new generations of students knew who Natalee Holloway was, not just as a headline, but as one of their own. In 2010, when news broke that Joran Sloot had murdered Stephanie Flores in Peru, the community felt the shock ripple again. For Beth, it was a confirmation of everything she had feared. If they had listened in Aruba, she whispered, maybe Stephanie would still be alive. That thought carried a bitter weight, but also strengthened her resolve. Her advocacy was no longer just for Natalee, but for every young woman whose life could be saved if lessons were learned. Beth began working more closely with organizations dedicated to missing persons. She spoke about the need for stronger international cooperation, better training for investigators, and resources for families who suddenly found themselves lost in bureaucracy. Parents told her that hearing Natalee's story made them more vigilant, more protective, and more aware of the risks their children faced. Her mission spread beyond the U.S. borders. Beth was invited to speak in Europe, Latin America, and Asia. Everywhere she went, people recognized Natalee's name. Some approached Beth in tears, telling her they had followed the case since 2005, praying for her daughter's return. Others simply held her hand in silence, knowing that words could never erase her pain. But in quiet moments, Beth admitted the cost of living in the public eye. Her grief was dissected, her choices criticized. Some accused her of exploiting the media. Others claimed she should move on. Beth ignored them. "This isn't about me," she said. "It's about Natalee. It's about justice. And it's about making sure no one else suffers in silence." Even so, the Holloway family's private life bore scars. Relationships strained under the weight of endless searching. Grief pulled them in different directions, but love for Natalee remained the center that held them together. Beth carried her daughter's photo everywhere. It wasn't just a picture, it was armor. Whenever exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her, she looked at Natalee's smile and found the strength to keep going. And though the world often saw her as unbreakable, Beth knew the truth. Resilience wasn't the absence of pain. It was the decision to rise in spite of it. Do you think resilience is born from tragedy? Or is it a conscious choice to keep moving despite the pain? Keep Natalee Holloway's name alive. Hit like, share this video with someone who needs to hear her story, and subscribe with the bell so her legacy continues to shine. Grief never leaves, it only changes shape. For Beth Holloway, the years after Natalee's disappearance became a constant balance between survival and purpose. Every morning, she woke with the same thought, another day without Natalee, and every evening, she fell asleep with the same vow, I will never stop fighting. At home in Alabama, Natalee's bedroom stayed much the same as it was the day she left. Her books lined the shelves. Her photographs remained on the dresser. The small reminders of her life were frozen in time. A sanctuary Beth could not bring herself to dismantle. "It feels like she could walk back in any moment," she once said. In Mountain Brook, reminders of Natalee surfaced in everyday life. Former classmates organized fundraisers in her honor. Schools awarded scholarships in her name. At every candlelight vigil, the glow of hundreds of flames lit up her photo, her smile reflecting in the faces of those who refused to forget her. But the years also brought strain. The Holloway family was tested by grief in ways few can imagine. Relationships fractured under the pressure. Some relatives coped by withdrawing, others by working harder. Beth herself carried the weight publicly, which meant every move she made was judged. Critics questioned her choices, her tone, even her persistence. She learned to live with the scrutiny. "If people criticize me for loving my daughter too loudly, so be it," Beth said. Her voice trembled but never broke. Every interview, every speech, every appearance was not about her. It was about Natalee. Her advocacy grew beyond personal tragedy. She became a guiding hand for other families searching for missing loved ones. Parents in despair sought her advice. She sat with them, cried with them, and told them the same thing she told herself every day. You cannot give up, because they are counting on you. Beth's work reshaped how people thought about resilience. She showed that strength was not the absence of pain. It was the decision to carry pain and still keep walking. "Some mornings I feel I cannot stand," she confessed. "But then I remember Natalee's laugh, and I find the strength to stand again." In Alabama, people often said Beth was the strongest woman they knew. But Beth was quick to remind them, "I'm not strong. I'm a mother, and mothers don't quit." Natalee's absence would always be felt. At weddings where she should have been a bridesmaid, at graduations where her name should have been called, at holidays where her laughter should have filled the room. But her presence endured in other ways. In candles, in prayers, in Beth's tireless voice that carried her daughter's story across the world. Through Beth's resilience, Natalee's light didn't fade. Instead, it grew, shining not just in Mountain Brook, but across oceans, in the hearts of strangers who never met her but carried her story. Do you believe resilience like Beth's is born from unimaginable loss? Or is it a choice she had to remake every single day? Keep Natalee Holloway's memory alive. Tap like, share her story, and subscribe with the bell so her light never fades. The years after Natalee Holloway's disappearance taught Beth Holloway one painful truth. Grief doesn't leave, it evolves. At first, it was raw and paralyzing, a storm that left her gasping for breath. Later, it became quieter but heavier, like a shadow that followed her everywhere. She described it once as learning to live with an open wound that never heals. At home in Alabama, the smallest details became reminders. A song on the radio that Natalee used to sing along to. A doctor's office Beth passed by, knowing her daughter once dreamed of practicing medicine. Even the scent of the ocean on family trips, which once brought joy, now reopened the ache of Aruba's beaches. Her community in Mountain Brook refused to let Natalee's name fade. Local churches kept her photo near the altar. Schools awarded scholarships in her honor, ensuring that new generations of students carried her legacy forward. At candlelight vigils, neighbors held one another, whispering prayers, as hundreds of tiny flames reflected off Natalee's framed graduation picture. Yet, for all the support, Beth often felt alone. Friends and strangers alike called her strong, but she admitted behind closed doors that strength was not something she felt. It was something she performed. "People see me fight," she told a counselor, "but they don't see me collapse at night." Her advocacy became both a mission and a burden. She traveled constantly, speaking at events and guiding families who faced their own nightmares. She carried binders of notes, photographs, and resources, each one representing another child missing, another mother pleading for answers. Many told her that her voice gave them courage, but Beth knew that courage was a mask. Her true fuel was love, love so fierce it refused to die even when Natalee had vanished. And while Beth became a symbol, the Holloway family bore the quieter scars. Grief-strained relationships, the constant pressure of media, the frustration with Aruba's justice system, and the endless cycle of hope and despair weighed on them heavily. Yet, despite cracks, love for Natalee held them together. Beth's trips back to Aruba were especially painful. Each time she walked the beaches, stood outside the police station, or passed the hotel where Natalee was last seen, memories collided with unanswered questions. Tourists sometimes recognized her, offering hugs or murmured condolences. Others avoided eye contact, weary of the story that had stained their island's reputation. Beth ignored the whispers. She wasn't there for approval. She was there for Natalee. Her faith also became both a comfort and a struggle. At times, she leaned on prayer as her only lifeline. At other times, she admitted to questioning why her daughter had been taken. But each time doubt threatened to consume her, she returned to the same thought. Natalee's light was worth fighting for, no matter how long it took. Over the years, Beth transformed into something she never expected, a lifeline for others. Families of missing children came to her not just for guidance, but for survival. She sat with them, listened to their stories, and shared her own. She never pretended to have answers. Instead, she offered what she herself had clung to, persistence. "You may never get closure," she would say, "but you can keep hope alive." In Mountain Brook, Natalee's classmates carried her memory into adulthood. At weddings, some brides left an empty chair with a flower in her honor. At reunions, her name was read aloud. Her friends often said the same thing. Natalee should have been here. Beth carried that truth every day. Natalee should have been here. She should have graduated college. She should have become a doctor. She should have lived a full life. But though she was gone, Beth made sure her story lived on. Not as a case file, but as a legacy of resilience, love, and faith. Resilience, Beth came to understand, was not about being unbreakable. It was about being broken again and again, yet choosing to stand anyway. And for her, that choice was made every single day, in Natalee's name. 18 years have passed since Natalee Holloway boarded a plane to Aruba with her classmates, full of excitement for the future. She never returned. What began as a joyful senior trip turned into one of the most haunting mysteries in modern history. Her disappearance shattered her family, her community, and her country. But it also ignited something extraordinary, a movement of resilience, advocacy, and awareness that continues to this day. Natalee was more than the case that defined her name. She was a bright student who dreamed of becoming a doctor. She was a friend who lifted others up with laughter and kindness. She was a daughter whose love inspired her mother to fight endlessly. Those who knew her remember her warmth, her curiosity, and her determination. Her story also reshaped the world. Parents became more cautious about travel. Schools rewrote safety policies for trips abroad. governments began reconsidering how missing person cases are handled across borders. And families who once felt powerless in the face of tragedy found strength in Beth Holloway's example. Beth herself became a symbol of persistence. She turned grief into action, helping others navigate the unimaginable. Her voice echoed in conference halls, courtrooms, and on television screens, reminding the world that love can outlast lies, and truth deserves to be pursued no matter the cost. Joran van der Sloot may have stolen Natalee's life, but he could never erase her impact. Each year, candlelight vigils in Mountain Brook still glow with her memory. Scholarships carry her name. Parents tell their children her story, not to spread fear, but to honor caution, love, and vigilance. And for Beth, Natalee's presence never left. "She is with me," she has said. "Every step, every word, every breath of this fight, I carry her with me." Natalee Holloway's story is not one of despair, but of resilience. It is a reminder of how fragile life is, how cruel the world can be, but also how powerful love remains in the face of loss. 18 years later, her name still commands attention, not because of the mystery of her disappearance, but because of the legacy she left behind. Natalee is remembered not for the way she was taken, but for the way her light continues to shine. What do you believe is Natalee Holloway's greatest legacy? Her mother's relentless advocacy, or the awareness her story brought to the world? Let's keep her memory alive. Press like, share this story so others never forget her, and subscribe with the bell so Natalee Holloway's light continues to guide us. Natalee Holloway was more than a headline. She was a daughter, a friend, a student, and a young woman filled with dreams. She had a smile that lit up rooms, a heart that cared deeply for others, and ambitions to change the world through medicine. Her disappearance in 2005 shook not only her family and her community in Mountain Brook, Alabama, but the entire world. For nearly 2 decades, her name has stood as a symbol of hope, heartbreak, and the relentless fight for justice. Though Natalee's life was cut short, her story continues to inspire. Her mother's unwavering determination has given strength to countless other families searching for loved ones. Natalee's legacy reminds us to cherish every moment, to fight for truth, and to never forget the voices of the missing. Natalee will always be remembered not for the tragedy of her loss, but for the light of the life she lived. Rest in peace, Natalee Holloway. Your story will never be forgotten.